this is my expert review of React and Litelement. So I'm just going to basically talk about what they are and how they operate here and what their different types of structures are, like how React uses framework, I believe, and Litelement has a library, and we'll dive into what that means later. Probably not the best person to be explaining this, but here we go. So this is the blog post I wrote, which we'll have this video linked right here when I'm done with it, another Inception type thing here. And so basically React and Litelement are both JavaScript and they to use to create web components. And so they have tutorials here. We can go on React and they have a lot on here. And so I did React. I looked at this one and I also looked at the Litelement one. And I found the Litelement one to be just a lot more like simpler and like kind of straightforward, where like it just has the blank things here. It tells you what each one does. Then you import this code from here into line one here, and it kind of gives you like a step-by-step thing to show you what you're making. Whereas like over here on this one, you just pretty much like dive in. You're just going straight in, interactive tic-tac-toe. Like, no really, like how do we code this? We're just basically here's, a highly advanced, sophisticated board game, and you're just going to have to follow along with that. So yeah, basically, so here there's a lot of confusion because it says on their own website they say they're a JavaScript library, but if you look at like other things, they're built as like a framework. So I don't know if they just are stupid and they just wrote this wrong, or I think more likely is it's just like interchangeable and it's kind of like nobody really cares if you say library or framework, and it's just kind of like you say framework, same library, doesn't really matter. But basically what this does is, it says here they help you compose user interfaces with components, and it basically takes you through how they built an interactive tic-tac-toe game. And I felt personally like the steps were like too much. Like it just kind of like jumps you right in, like just adding like a bunch of lines of code. I mean, I don't know. I could just be stupid, but like you're just adding like all this stuff, and like they don't really give you an explanation of what each one was. Like how on Litelement it'll tell you like what they're kind of doing in each one, whereas this one just says like change the render method kind of. I don't know. That could just be me. Who knows? But basically, so then they just both some of the main differences were basically like how they're the says here the framework and library, and how a library kind of goes like how this so here like your code, and then you pull from the library, kind of like, hey, like library, I need you now, come over, and the library comes over and gives you what you need. Whereas like frameworks like kind of like your boss, or like they're like in charge, and they like don't really care about you, and they're just like, hey, like I'll need you when I need you, just go sit in the corner, mind your own business until then. Yes, and so then also Litelement is 30% faster according to that article that I've read, but I mean that could be like absolute minuscule fractions of time that could not be noticeable to us dumb humans. There was something else that I saw here. This was a just Stack Overflow. I was going on here for a lot to just like research like different things that because obviously I didn't know a lot of this, so just like typing in questions and stuff. Not questions, but like topics and things, and then like looking at articles that people had wrote. And this was a good article about the main differences about the virtual DOMs, and then that led me down a rabbit hole of reading about like, oh, like what other types of DOMs out there are, and like the shadow DOM. Like I read up on that stuff, trying to figure out what that all was about. So I think that the biggest things that I took away was like before going into this, I didn't understand. I mean, I'd never heard of either of these things, and then after reading it, I think like I understand Litelement probably a little bit more, and I'm not really sure like if that's more popular or whatever, but like I think they're obviously pretty similar. I could transfer, if by some gift of God I understood this completely, I could probably transfer my skills over to React eventually. Like because I feel like once you know one, you kind of know them all. But when you know none of them, you know none of them. So I think that was pretty much the big things that I learned, just the differences between them, and then like what they did. And then I somehow managed to read through all this. I didn't understand like a lot of like the syntax really, but like I understood like the overall like arching themes of like what the like what React is trying to do here, and like how you like we'll just like scroll down farther and just like how you can control the game. And like there's an interesting point about like time jumping or time something. I don't know if I can find table contents here, but it's basically like you could like store moves. You could like store the code in the history, and then it would go back up, and then you could like go like reset, kind of like back to like previous move in the tic tac toe game. I found that really interesting because it was kind of like being able to like go back in time, kind of like time traveling. Right here, adding time traveling. There we go. So they go back in time and make previous games, and like I read through this code, and it was kind of like I kind of comprehended this a little bit just because like I feel like it was a little more basic. We're just like these are the times, and like after the first move, oh we have an X here, and then after the second move we have XO, and it kind of like stores each move, and you can like jump back and forth between the two moves. So those are the biggest things that I talked about in this blog post. I think just reading it, and then I mean you'll definitely get a lot more information just by the links. I pretty much I linked every link that I read about. Just you'll definitely get a lot more info there if you need that info. So I think that's pretty much all I have to talk about. This was really helpful. I don't know if I had this website still pulled up. Yeah, this one here. This like dove in libraries and frameworks. What's the difference? This guy did a really good job to me about explaining it, pulling from trusty Wikipedia and just going through here about how this inversion of control and how the control flips if you're in a library and framework from you kind of being in control to you being the framework's like bitch. So I thought that was good. Like this here, library call us, get the job done. Framework, you don't call us, we call you. I thought that was like like a good joke, but also it kind of really like shows how the framework and library are different, like the big differences. That's pretty much all I have to say about this. I'd recommend, like I said, I think the best way to get any more information is to just Google things or just click all these hyperlinks I have here that I linked to places that explain things a lot better than I did. So